Hey Rosanne, good to see you. Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. Appreciate that. Um, Let me kick off by asking you about something that you mentioned to me last time we spoke. You basically said that the quality of the data that's available about breastfeeding is pretty poor and not tremendously helpful for mothers. I mean, what did you mean by that? And just explain why that's important.
Okay, so at the moment, if a mother is unsure if her baby is not getting any milk or enough milk, the only accurate way to measure this is in a hospital environment using a high precision motion compensated scales. So it's a highly protocolized procedure where a medical professional will swaddle the baby, they weigh the baby on these scales, the mother breastfeeds the baby, and they reweigh the baby. Now, this is obviously method is used for very, very preemie babies, very, very tiny babies, but it is not a method that is recommended in the home environment where mothers are using kind of domestic weighing scales that are not high precision and motion compensated. So what we, for Coro, the audience of mothers who are at home, the majority of mothers who want to breastfeed, as I said, over 80% of mothers in the UK will start breastfeeding, but they're stopping. And when we survey women internationally and say, why did you stop breastfeeding if you wanted to start? They will say, I didn't know if my baby was getting any milk or I didn't know if my baby was getting enough milk. So currently, women at home who have a healthy baby but are not sure, they are told the way to check if their baby is getting enough milk are things like counting wet nappies, checking for satiety signs, and using an instinct, to see if they can kind of figure out all of these cues. So what we want to do with Coro is for the mothers, and again, and I really want to stress this through the podcast, it's probably a good chance to get it out in the very beginning. Coro is by no means to replace natural breastfeeding. Okay. So if a mother is breastfeeding naturally and her baby's gaining weight and she's happy, this is not the product for her. Coro is for mothers who want to breastfeed, but they're about to stop because of that uncertainty. And it's a secondary tool in her toolkit. So mothers wear Coro, and as she's feeding her baby, she can see exactly how much milk her baby is getting. So the data is transmitted to the app on her phone in real time. So again, it's for that cohort of mothers who they think their baby is hungry and they're about to stop and use formula and they don't want to use formula.
Yeah. But let me just ask you that it also, I mean, one of the interesting things about this is that it also enables you to collect broader data about breastfeeding levels, doesn't it? I mean, just explain about where that bit kind of fits.
Yeah, so obviously what we can do is we want mothers at home to reach their own breastfeeding goals and give Coro to them as a tool. They see that it's working, they start to they breastfeed for longer and they continue their journey, or they see it's not working and they supplement a formula. But if you think of it, if you kind of take a bird's eye view and think of it at a broader level, what we see is the population data sets. So what we want is to kind of revolutionize breastfeeding in that regard. So if you can imagine with the weighing method, they can't do large population studies weighing thousands and thousands of babies in this highly protocolized procedure. So Coro can actually really impact that academic and medical breastfeeding world. So we, for example, can provide Coro to academic researchers, and they can look at all sorts of things they've never been able to explore before at that population level. The external factors that impact breastfeeding, such as, does a mother's BMI impact her milk supply? If a mother is taking medication, for example, diabetes medication, is this impacting her supply? So we can, researchers can take Coro into their clinical and research environments and use it in those groups and then see that data at a larger level for their studies. And then secondly, there's the anonymized data sets of all of the women breastfeeding across Ireland, UK, Europe, the United States, and how those breastfeeding profiles, what does that look like in terms of global health population outcome? How does population extension and women reaching the 6 month target, which is the minimum target for kind of exclusive breastfeeding at the moment, that doctors really want women to get to that 6 months, and what does that look like for global population health outcomes in terms of cancer, diabetes, obesity, all of the things we know, we believe to know, and we know that breastfeeding impacts down the line.
So better data enables people to develop better policies to help people you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
have a better experience of breastfeeding. Just before we go into the kind of the other stuff, I mean, just explain briefly for people the technology that you've developed because it's really quite unique. I mean, I was really surprised when you described it to me. You just want to explain how the technology works in simple terms to people.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, you never want to introduce a barrier to breastfeeding. Okay. Again, natural breastfeeding is best. But if you do, what you want is, I guess, and what women would want is the minimum barrier between mother and
Yeah.
baby. So something as close to skin contact as possible. So at the moment, that is in the form of silicon, medical grade silicon. So mothers are already familiar with these shields. So breastfeeding shields are currently about £10 in every pharmacy, and they're currently used for skin protection. So they're already on the market. They're highly accessible, highly tolerable. About 98% of medical professionals would recommend them for those indications being skin protection, inverted nipples, women who have issues with oversupply. So the technology, the holy grail was not to introduce more barriers, but can we get a sensor, a flow meter to fit into the already existing form, the already existing minimum barrier? And we were the first company in the world to do that. So Coro, in effect, looks and feels exactly like a regular £10 shield. However, with our embedded patented technology, it's here already. So it's not a jump for mothers to use this. And
Okay.
again, minimum barrier. So moms use Coro like they would a regular shield. And as they're feeding their baby, all the data comes up on their phone in real time. So as they're feeding, they can see, okay, 1 mils, 2 mils, they can actually get that reassurance and they can know. So, the use cases vary obviously for mothers. You know, my founders, Helen and Jamie, their first baby was absolutely tiny. He wasn't preemie, but he was tiny. So that's where breast milk was so important for these really tiny babies. And you might see mothers using it if they have a preemie baby for every feed until their baby reaches a healthy weight. For the majority of mothers, what we see is that they go home in the first 7 to 10 days, they're making that decision. They could be struggling with breastfeeding.
Mm.
We're linking them with the lactation consultant, but they're just so unsure. Is there enough milk there? Maybe I should give them a bottle or give the baby a bottle. And they use Coro to kind of in the first few weeks. And once they become confident breastfeeders, they may never use Coro again, or they may never use it for a subsequent baby. But what we have done is, the woman has become a confident
Yeah.
knowing those
Yeah.
cues. And
Yeah. And
then
those are
it's really
really important
important.
outcomes, aren't they?
Yeah, really important.
Yeah. And what is, I mean, it's a very interesting bit of technology and it's a really important use case. I can see that. What was it that set you on this path or set the company on this path? I mean,
Yeah, well, I guess that's Jamie and Helen, my co-founders. Helen is a doctor, a medical doctor, and Jamie is an electronics engineer. And when their baby was first born, it was Helen's exact experience with the public health nurse coming out and putting this weighing scales on the kitchen table. And they would weigh the baby. Helen would breastfeed the baby and weigh the baby. And Helen knew this is not an accurate representation. It's not recommended. But even medical professionals working in the home they're trying their best to ascertain weight gain in any way. So Jamie was working with microflow sensing in another industry, and he started to examine the patent art that was available. And he could see actually that a lot of baby companies, a lot of products had been released trying to, confirm accurate information to mothers, but they could never get that scientific proof of efficacy around the accuracy. He could see then that there was filings going around the shield because the shield was the known solution. You don't want more clunky devices. You don't want devices or products with wires and lots of things hanging out of them. So the shield was always the optimum and known solution, but nobody could get the tech in there. Nobody could get it to fit and to work, except we were the first to do that. So Jamie spent 2 years developing the technology, and when the patent's granted, that's when we quit our jobs and started the company in 2017.
okay. And let me ask you about your job as the CEO. I mean,
Yeah.
I know from personal experience, it's extraordinarily difficult to build very innovative products and to get them to market. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's hard work. What is it that gets you out of bed every day to kind of keep plugging away. I mean, people say to me, building a business is like riding a roller coaster, there's up days, down days. I mean, it's a tough gig. What is it that motivates you personally to keep plugging away at that challenge?
Well, I think at every stage of the journey. So look, we were never, I would say, this whole thing about entrepreneurs being the riskiest people. Like, we were a bit older in our careers. Like I was in my mid 30s, was working in finance, wasn't like in love with it. And I wanted to build a business. I wanted to build a company, but I was never going to leave my safe job for anything. Like this had to be like a really good idea, like so I had always been toying with that idea for years. Jamie is actually my cousin. So I was always with Helen and Jamie, like when the baby was born, when we were thinking about ideas, when we were looking at the market for the 2 years before the company, we were like, this is huge. Could we get it to work? So we were, three of us were there together. It was very organic. And we all wanted to do something that if we were going to do it, it was going to be groundbreaking and it had to be worth the risk.
Yeah.
And it had to be something that had never been done in the world. Like we weren't just solving like kind of problems or solving something that somebody might pay for, like making an existing product like 10% better or 20% better. Like we wanted to solve a problem that is critically felt that no one in the world had solved. So when we then got on the journey, and then the journey was, it's like, as you said, it's just like relentless, I would say is the one word I
Mm.
would use if I had to pick one word, I'd say relentless, is that at every stage of our journey, we were still further ahead than everyone else. So every time we failed, we could see from what competitors were filing, they were light years behind us. So at every stage of all, like it took us 6 years to get that sensor to work accurately. For it was 6 years failure upon failure, testing,
Yeah.
testing, testing,
Yeah.
material science, grant funding, always eking out one step closer, but we were always ahead. So I think that's probably what has got us out of bed. Like even if we were always at the forefront, and we knew with the miniaturization of technology, like what the sensor we use now is completely different to the method we used in 2017. So we knew eventually this problem was going to be solved. So could we stay in the game long enough that we would be at the forefront to solve it when the technology got smaller and smaller and the opportunity came up? Would we still be there with all the learnings and that we would be there to do it?
Yeah.
So it is sort of a game of, just sometimes it's just about being in the game long enough, and can you keep the doors open, the cash coming in for salaries, like, because if we, eventually this was going to be solved. As I said, we aren't the only people trying to tackle this,
Yeah. I
but
mean, it illustrates the value of perseverance, really,
yes,
'cause that's what you're talking about. I mean, you persevered at it for quite a significant period of time, which is impressive, actually. I mean, it's like I said, it's a tough gig, and it's good to see people breaking through that. Let me ask you about one of the things that's happening just at the moment. I mean, it's really sort of kicked in the last couple of years. Is the impact of AI? I mean, is AI impacting on the way that you're gonna, for example, use the data that comes out of this? Has AI impacted on the way you've designed the technology at all? I mean, what's been the role of AI in terms of impacting the company in the last few years?
well, to date, zero. So we are actually measuring real milk volume for the first time in the world using, it's real volume through a sensor. Um, and we will be the only company in the world to record and own this data in the world. So essentially, if we were to ever build AI modeling going forward, we are essentially the only company in the world that have the baseline accurate data and will be able to inform those AI algorithms. So when we launch to the market and we're getting in the broader data sets, yes, AI will definitely have a point in the future. But being the first in the world to even see this data and to own this data and to be able to view it, no, at the moment AI has had zero to do with the business to date.
Right. Okay. So it means that there's quite a lot of exciting opportunities will appear, won't they, as you start to be able to use
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
lots of exciting things that could happen. I mean, when you've been building the business, I mean, have there been any kind of critical moments, perhaps make or break moments that have shaped the way the business has developed?
We've had all of the horrendous, business landscape issues like everybody else. There was Brexit, there was Suez Canal, there was COVID. That was like a massive,
Yeah.
massive delay for us. Um, there's always money is always a problem. Like I'm not, with this podcast, I'm probably like preaching to the choir, but I think for us, we have never pivoted. Like we went out to our initial investors, to the European Commission for public funding, for the government. The holy grail has always been breast milk volume for doctors, for the academic and medical community, for mothers at home. Breast milk volume, that's what people are trying to achieve. So we have never had to pivot. Now, we have had all of the other horrendous times around keeping a business going and keeping it floating and functional and money coming in. But we've never had to pivot. No, we've always said if we ever know at one point we can't get to breast milk volume, that's it. We've never been trying to achieve anything else. Now, in the meantime, have we achieved other things? Amazingly, around all of our studies, the clinical studies, the technology validation, we are actually measuring milk flow, milk volume, and temperature. So they were things that we were able to integrate into the technology quite simply. And they are having an impact for, if you can imagine, in other studies. So we were the first company, we were the first people in the world to ever record the pulsating sequence of how babies feed. And this feed profile of how babies suck and the rate of the suck and the pressure, that is going to be potentially huge in terms of tongue tie research. So even when we were trying to get to volume, we're always getting closer around it. We were still adding value all the time. But no, we've never pivoted. Like mothers and the medical community, volume is number one, and we've never moved away from that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I can see why that focus is important. I mean, it's a very good point you make there. I mean, business is often about focus and not being distracted by other things, isn't it? I mean, let me ask you about the apart from that focus on the flow. I mean, what other values have you have you brought to the process of building the business? I mean, are there other things that have influenced the way the business has been built? I mean, I mean, lots of companies have their values written down, don't they? I mean, has that kind of process worked through with you?
Yeah, look, what we want is to support mothers. And, breastfeeding is a very emotive and it can be a very controversial landscape. For the women that it works first time and naturally for, they're like, why introduce the technology? Why, are you trying to commoditize a natural process? Why do women need this? It's a pretty binary. Like for a lot of women, it's a beautiful moment in their journey with their baby. And for other women, they feel like a failure if it doesn't work. They feel stigmatized. They feel polarized. They feel like they're not trying hard enough, that they're not doing it right. And it can be a very divisive landscape in general. So what we want to do is move away from that. So, there is nothing wrong with, we want to say to women, if you have low supply, there is nothing wrong with formula. Formula is life-saving and life-giving. And mothers shouldn't be made feel bad for using formula. And if you choose to breastfeed, that's wonderful. And we can support you if you're unsure. And if you're naturally breastfeeding, you've no issues, that's brilliant. You don't need to talk to us or look at this product. So it's to really try and remove that judgment from breastfeeding landscape and to just support all mothers, whatever their journey looks like. Again, European mothers have a very well supported maternity leave versus US mothers who have got 6 to 12 weeks. And again, it's being non-judgmental, being supportive to mothers, but also we want to be a company that's utterly courageous and that is based in clinical accuracy. So no gimmicks, accurate data for the first time in the world. Give mothers accurate information and let them make the decision in how best to feed their baby. Women are, mothers particularly are so intelligent, and we have talked to thousands of them over this journey. And it's amazing how every single story you think, are they all nearly the same when you speak to thousands of mothers, but it's always entirely different. And it's entirely different baby by baby. So I think we want to be seen as courageous in the face of those multinational companies with their billions and billions who weren't able to develop this technology and to do it for mothers who need it. And then on a second, at the higher level, again, we want to revolutionize breastfeeding research using this technology. Let's look at those broader population data sets. Let's look at how, breastfeeding can, not only we know the impact, the health benefits to the baby, and we know it for the mother, like the reduction in breast cancer, ovarian cancer, heart disease, stroke, like the whole of benefit for society if we can support women in that journey. So yeah, they would be our values. Like we want to be, at the forefront of innovation, and we are at our core a technology company.
Yeah. And let me ask you about the courageous bit. I mean, I get your logic. Where does that come from? I mean, what has made you decide to, if you like, bang your head against the wall?
Yeah, I guess, look, you can be courageous when, as I said, we were always, even in the hardest times, we were getting a little bit closer, whether it was finding a correct material, finding a component, finding us somebody in the world who had the specialist skills to do something that we needed to do. And again, it really comes down to that point, doing something that has never been done before. Like, I mean, would I still have the feeling of building this if there was another company already doing it? Would the is the juice worth the squeeze kind of thing, but being courageous. And again, it's talking to those mothers. Like every day I go out, thousands of mothers every year I speak to, our whole team, and they're like, oh my God, if this product existed when I had my kids, or I need that for my sister as a baby right now, I need that. Like it's, most people in their life, man, woman, or child, has some touch point to a breastfeeding experience. And even if they don't get it immediately, I've had so many male investors be like, oh, breastfeeding, that's cute. Yeah, right. They go home, they talk to the women in their life, whether it be their wife, their daughter, their granddaughter, and they will come running back to me saying, like, this is the best. I cannot believe this product doesn't exist. I cannot believe there's no competitor in the world. I cannot believe there is no alternative, only this weighing scales thing, in a hospital for very, very tiny babies. So the demand is there, the need is there. And again, it's quite a simple problem for people to understand immediately. They just need to walk into a baby store and see, does this product or anything like it exist? And no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't take huge, deep research to understand that this is a massive unmet need. And the demand, if they speak to women who have tried breastfeeding or who have successfully breastfed, that they can see the value in this product.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can see that it'll have a transformative effect. And that seems to me to be a pretty good thing. Let me ask you about building. I mean, you're in the process of starting to scale now. I mean, which means you've got to bring more people in, you've got to build a team, you've got to deliver the kind of outcomes that you're looking for. I mean, what's your take on that process of building an organization to deliver on those objectives? I mean, you've done the initial work. In one sense, you move to a different phase now. I mean, you've got the technology, it works, you've got the investment. Now you've got to get it out there to millions of women. I mean, just talk to me about that next kind of phase that you're moving into.
Well, for me personally, I would say it's going to be like running a completely different company, if I'm
Yeah,
being frank.
yeah,
Speaking for the company as a whole, it's really exciting. So for
yeah.
the first, 8 years, we were a deep tech R&D company of engineers and scientists and clinical professionals. So biomedical engineers, electronic, mechanical engineers, and then, medical professionals on, kind of adjacent to us. In the last year, we've had to start ramping up sales and marketing. And now we're talking about obviously retail distribution. Now we're talking about digital marketing. We're talking about influencers. We're talking about advertising in store. Our entire language on the side of the house, like on the marketing side and on the commercialization, the launch commercialization side, should I say, is completely different. So it's really exciting because even in the last 3 years, as we built up the manufacturing capability, the engineering team, the core, founding engineering team were really still in that. They're still in that manufacturing piece. So we were still very much for the first 8 years there. Now they're still working away, obviously, but now my focus has really shifted. Now we're bringing in a whole different animal, I would say. Like I'm bringing in these marketing specialists, and it's like man versus alien,
Yeah,
like in
yeah,
terms of
yeah. I get
the
that.
language is different, the budgets are different. Like it's very, very exciting. So we are all really excited because we've been, as I said, when we launch in the next couple of months, we'll be 9 years formally as a company, and really for the three founders, 11 years. So, that's a 10-year journey in hardware, and it's a very exciting step. And look, as I said, it's a long journey. So we're really, really excited about the next phase, but also knowing that it is not our core area of expertise. So our biggest challenge and opportunity is hiring in the absolute killer people we need on the team to execute the commercialization.
Yeah. I mean, and getting the right people on the bus, as it were, is a really important process. I mean, but there's another process which is about, if you like, getting them in the right seats, but also building a performance culture. And one of the things that's challenging about that is that you've got a bunch of engineers that kind of work one way, and then
Mm-hmm.
you've got a bunch of kind of creative marketing people that work another way and think another way. I mean, that's my experience. They think in very different ways. So that creates a challenge in terms of building a performance culture in the business that keeps the business moving forward. I mean, what are your thoughts on that challenge?
Well, look, we're still small enough that we organize. We have a very flat structure, so we're all in one big open space, and we will never. We will like obviously we have a weekly meeting, and everyone's in that together. The marketing team, the engineering team, and they both know what each other's working on, and we expose them to each other every day. So
Okay.
I might have a separate meeting with the marketing team and the engineering team to theirs, but it really is. We're still all working off the same hymn sheet, and everyone particularly I would say for until a company gets to a size that they have to be separated, but I don't ever see that being of value. Like certainly we're all in one big open plan and we're all learning from each other. Like I don't have an engineering or science or technology background, and I'm the CEO of a technology company, but I'm learning from those engineers, and I was the only non-engineer or non-techie for the first 6 years. Now I have more people maybe from a background more similar to mine, but I have no marketing experience, and I'm learning from them. And we really encourage and foster that cross collaboration and education, because if the marketers don't understand the engineering problem, it's very hard for us to message that out to mothers, like how to clean it, how to touch, like it's really important they all know what they're doing. And again, the marketing team need to feed back. Like when we do our large sample user testing, we need to come back to the engineers and say, no, the moms don't like that. Like, so in the first ever Coro, funnily enough, we used to have a light in the shield. And like we'd come back, I was meeting mothers and they were like, take this light, it's keeping the baby awake. Why would you have a light in the shield? And the engineers had thought this was wonderful. So
Yeah.
it's all because we're so early in our journey, and like the user testing and getting a product that women are happy with, it's always have to have that conversation going both ways. And for us being a team of our size, I don't, we're all in Dublin. Like we don't have like people working in different countries. Like our software, everything is done in one place and we're all together. So for now, I don't see that changing. While we're at this size, we're going to retain those values.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier on about how it's tough being the CEO. It's that thing about riding the roller coaster, isn't it? Good days and bad days. In small teams or relatively small teams, that's tough on staff as well. I mean, how do you build in resilience to the way you work with people? Because they will face setbacks, the company will face setbacks, you will face setbacks. So one of the most important things in building a business is building that kind of resilience muscle, I guess. I mean, what are your thoughts about how you're going to, or how you're doing that, how you do that?
Well, I personally think it's through modeling it. If it comes from the top, everyone follows. So, I mean, I think everyone on my team would say I'm the tightest CEO in the world with money. And like I live that way. I fly economy with them. I was over at JP Morgan this year and staying in a two-star hostel. So when your employees see how hard you work to make every penny go further, and it's our, like, we're a non-revenue generating company. So every cent we get is investors' money, and that has to be spent with utter frugality. And
Yeah.
I think they know I'm not driving around, like my car is 20 years old. So if they see the founders working hard and living that way, they are happy to follow. Like, I think that's the best way. Like, and if they see like you getting knocked down and getting back up, no, 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 all the time, and you still continue going, they're on that journey with you. They come to those meetings with me. They're help preparing the pitch decks. We're going to trade shows together. We're traveling. Like they're alongside us. So they're feeling it too. But if you can model it for them and show them, this is how you get back up. It's the only way it works. And look, it's a really exciting place to work. Like it's not all bad. Like people love working in a startup. There is freedom for creativity. the learning across different departments. You know, as I said, if they want to learn about investors, they come to the meetings with me. We don't operate in silos. If somebody wants to learn to code, we give them the opportunity to do that. There's a flexibility there that you don't get in big organizations, and that's the biggest thing to attracting really good employees. And I think once they know their voice is heard, you know, once they're valued, and everyone has an equal voice, I think. And again, look, sometimes that's just down to sheer size. We're at a size where that's still workable. But that's how we've built the business.
Yeah, I mean, what was going through my mind is that point you just made that, that's fine at the moment and that's all good stuff.
Mhm.
It will change as you start to scale, won't it?
It will, of course, but I think if the people that we're bringing in now, we see them as the senior management team in the future. And if they've learned how we do things and how we've done things for 10 years, and they bring that back to larger teams, whether we hire 50 more people and they don't get to see me every day, we would hope that it is being modeled from the senior managers that we have employed and that have been working under us, for a very long time. So, I really, it does sound like a trope, but culture comes from the top. And as I said, I've worked in organizations and, it's worked for us so far, and we've succeeded, and well, maybe not thrived. We've definitely succeeded for 10 years, so we're doing something right.
Still here. That's the
Yeah,
main thing. Let me ask you about your experiences and what you've learned from on the kind of journey, if you like. I mean, were there any critical moments that kind of shaped you as the CEO?
Money, like for me, I know it's like obviously for the technology, I feel like my role is to keep the doors open financially so the engineers can get to this solution and like take all the noise away from them so they can get this tech to work. So yeah, I mean, for 6 years, as I said, the flow meter didn't work, but we were always eking. We always had more things to try. There was never a dead end. So I really focus on, can I get the cash in? So like it's a very probably a little bit of an unpopular answer, but cash kind of can solve 99% of your problems if you can stay in the game long enough, buy the equipment, buy the testing, and get through the next problem. So I've always kind of retained that as my North Star, is that if we don't run out of money, then I can take the noise away from the guys who are inventing who are getting this working. So yeah, as again, it's not the most popular answer, but like there was times where we were obviously the founders stopped paying themselves so we could continue paying the engineers. We were down to, I think at one point we got down to our last €5,000 in the bank account before our next tranche of funding came in. And it always felt like it was by the skin of our teeth. And there is a part of this startup journey that you're flying by the seat of your pants pretty much, until you start generating revenue, right? So I think that's, again, not only when we launched and are building those sales and marketing teams and all that, but once you start generating revenue, now it's going to be a different financial model. Maybe we won't need to be like, we can then kind of justify slightly more expenditure because we will have more certainty of money coming in. But, these first 10 years for me, and I think that is the valley of death, if most founders are being honest, is you run out of cash before you run out of ways to solve the problem. So I come from a finance background. It's never a fantastically interesting answer, but
Yeah, the longer the runway, the better.
yeah, that's the answer,
There is-
right?
Yeah. There's nothing, clever about that. If you've got a good long runway, you've got a better chance. I mean, Let me ask you about decision making. I mean, what was the most difficult decision you've had to make when you look back over the last 10 years? I mean, what was the most difficult decision that you've had to make, and what did you learn from that experience?
I would say for us, it's been, if there has been a bad, so we're being offered money, obviously, from different sources and having to walk away from money that doesn't feel quite right.
Oh, but that was painful.
Yeah, because we have a lot of, as I said, we've no VC funding, we've no institutional funding on the cap table. So all of my investors are angel investors, high net worths. So I mean, I would be meeting lots of people and asking them for money, and very rarely, I think maybe twice, being offered money that you just know doesn't feel quite right, and and turning it down, even though you need money badly. And in the short term, it could obviously change maybe the speed of progression, or everyone can have a bonus, or chocolate biscuits in the office, like something that could, but you turn it down anyway. And that's hard when you work, I feel, for an engineering and a very tech.
What did you learn from that experience, from turning it down? I mean, what did you learn from that?
Well, one, that I was right, the team was right. Like, definitely, like looking back and then hearing about other people who took the money, then, it'll always come out of the woodwork, like the horror stories of bad investors. So knowing you're right, but the most important thing, and it's sometimes you have to trust your gut. And I, working for a very kind of, a company with very much science at its core, we make all our decisions based on data. It's tested, it's measured, and the decision is made. And then, but from my side, sometimes there is no rational rhyme or reason, but sometimes you just have a feeling. And I think sometimes you need to trust that feeling. Now, I wouldn't run the company on my feelings every day, but every now and again, you do have to do that. And I think they're the kind of big moments where I kind of look back and go, God, was that a good or a bad decision? Could the company have gone faster? Blah, blah, blah. But no, I've never regretted the money I've turned down. I think for the the founders, yeah, it's just been like the people were asked to potentially provide the Coro 2 in terms of what research they're doing. So we were publicly funded by the European Commission for our clinical study. That was European taxpayers' money. It was really important for us that we were not paid privately by a laboratory or somebody with private interest to say that the sensor works. So we know all sorts of people will want this data, but for us, we only want to work with high integrity, publicly funded institutions. So we're doing work with, academic and medical researchers who want to use this data for good outcomes. So I would say we make decisions every day. Again, mine because of what I'm doing in the company in terms of investment, but for the others, every day we're met with decisions where you do actually have to use your moral compass, and we have to say what is good for women, what is good for babies. This product, we have always gotten so much traction with public funding and the government support from the Irish government because it's a product that's good for moms, it's good for babies, and ultimately it's good for society. But there are times where potentially, do we want it being used for, like, where is that data going to, and where would it end up? So they're decisions we make on a case by case basis.
Sure. Yeah. And let me ask you about making mistakes, because I mean, most CEOs I talk to say they make mistakes all the time. I mean, what's been the biggest mistake that you've made, and what have you learned from that?
Um, yeah, I do make mistakes all the time, but I don't like to remember. Like, I think I learn from them, but I don't particularly remember them because there's so many that I would not get out of bed if I thought about them again.
There's nothing that sticks in your mind. You think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that.
Oh yeah, okay. So there's one biggie, and it was a kind of we were working with a different firm. The relationship got very bad. They were trying their best, but they couldn't do what they said they could do. We had, because it had started out so well, it just went on too long. Like, it wasn't working. Gave it too much runway, gave it too much airtime. And then they were frustrated that they couldn't get it to work. And then everyone started blaming each other. And it should have just been cut so much more quickly.
Yeah.
It just took more time than I would have liked. So I think now I'm a little bit quicker. If it's not working, I'm not maybe just, if it's not working, just pull the plug quickly. And I think that, yeah, that went on too long, and it cost money in the end. And everyone got frustrated. Like, my team was frustrated, demoralized, their team. And then we all ended up like, not happy at all. And in the end, it didn't work anyway. We all had to walk away. So it would have just been better if we could have all just put up our hands early and said, look, we've asked for the impossible. You can't do it. Let's not,
I
flog
mean,
a dead horse.
not making difficult decisions is often really corrosive, isn't it? I mean, it's often better to make them, as painful as it may be. And let me ask you about the flip side. I mean, what would you say are the factors that have made your company successful? Now, I know it's not generating huge amounts of revenue yet. I mean, it will be very soon because you're about to go to market. But what would you say are the factors when you look back on the last 10 years that have made the business successful?
I would say I didn't recognize it initially. I recognize it now, but it was actually the investors when we first went out for our first round, and and I kind of alluded to it earlier, was the founding team.
Yeah.
So a doctor, an engineer, and somebody in finance, like my project management background. And that happened very organically for us. But when I went out to raise money, and it never really dawned on the three of us, we were just like, okay, let's do this together. And when we went out to the investors, they were like, this is brilliant. Like, this is three different area of expertise, three different experience. They loved that actually. And when I'm asked that question, I say it to a lot of young startups coming out of college. They might be three software developers together. And I'm like, guys, you're going to need at some level to bring in a different skill set, just for that broader view, and investors like it. So I would say that's one thing we did right, but it happened by accident. And again, it has been slightly more straightforward for us in doing things right, as in we knew if we ever came to a dead end with milk volume, the company was closed. So we've never had to kind of think, well, maybe we could move to this, or maybe we could offer that. It was volume or nothing. So that's kind of very much something that has kind of kept us.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, that, because focus is really important to the way businesses grow and develop, and it's so easy to lose focus. But what you're saying was, well, this was the only focus, because if we didn't focus on that, we were going to stop, which is actually quite a powerful discipline, I think. I mean, it's interesting hearing you describe that. Let me ask you a slightly different version of that question. If you were going to start from scratch again, what might you do differently as a result of what you've learned?
It was said to me at the beginning, I would probably have raised more because I had the ability to raise more in 2017 to 2020. And then, the world changed and raising money was a lot harder. I think, I raised 4 times more than I needed to, but it still wasn't enough. And I was told that by multiple entrepreneurs that I spoke to. It's going to take you 3 times longer and 3 times hard, 3 times more money. And nothing has ever been truer than that for us. So I think when I had the option of money, I should have taken more, but we actually thought this was loads, because it was 4 times more than we needed to. But the effort and the storytelling and the raising at each round takes so much time, especially when you're still trying to get the tech to work. So I think that would have been a big one for me. I kind of say to people, look, de-risk it as much as you can. That we did that. But at some point you're going to have to actually just press the button and go for it. So I think we kind of did that quite well as well. Like we spent 2 years looking at the market, making sure the technology, the patent granted, making sure we kind of had the backbone of how is this going to work, before. And then one day we were like, we're either have to, or get off the pot. So that's it. So that's.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to stick your neck out, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last question before we wind up. And again, it's a bit of a variation on that one again. I mean, I'm sure you've had lots of good advice along the way. What advice would you offer to a rookie CEO who was kind of thinking about starting out on the sort of journey that you've been on? I mean, what advice would you offer them?
Be hyper focused on the paperwork. Okay, so my background was in wealth management, and now after 10 years in startup, the single greatest failure of startups is founder fallout, I would say. Maybe it's the second after the product not working, but for me, I think it's founder fallout and investor fallout. So your company constitution, your shareholders agreement, and being absolutely watertight, and you being so clear, if this investor comes in, they are getting X. They're getting a board seat. They're getting voting rights. They can outvote the founders. The companies I have met that have made, it seems like the most basic of mistakes. They bring in one investor who has the control of the company immediately over the founders. There are nefarious actors out there. And I think it's very boring getting your company documentation in order. But if you set it down and spend a couple of months at the very beginning with a really good lawyer, then everything flows from that. But that really, I'm talking about solid housekeeping and that administration element being correct. The second piece was, especially for Jamie, Helen, and I, we're family. So we went straight to a lawyer and they were like, okay, I'm the CEO. This is my job. Jamie is the CTO. This is his job. And Helen is our chief research officer. This is her job. And this is your role, this is your responsibility. And we never want to fall out as family ever. That was our whole, we went to the lawyer, we're like, okay, if this doesn't work, we want it not to work, but we don't want to end up like fighting. And this is how decisions are going to be made. So I think if I was a founder and we would do it again, but it was coming from my background of seeing the amount of businesses, amount of families that fall out because people think, well, I want to be the CEO and you're the COO, and and dilution. People like founders and investors don't understand very basic dilution. The instrument of raising more and more money and what happens to their equity. So I would be very much of the mind that getting your house in order and being on top of that as a CEO is really sacrosanct to any business.
Yeah, and very good advice, I think. I mean, I've been through some of those challenges myself, and you know, it's getting the ground rules right on
Yeah.
day one, pretty important, and it's difficult to do sometimes, but pretty important. Rosanne, thank you for
Thank you.
sharing that story. I mean, absolutely fascinating. And I mean, you're now moving into the kind of next stage, which I know you've just described as really exciting. And I think it will be really exciting. And what a great product, and it'll have a fantastic impact, I have no doubt. So thank you for coming and sharing the story, and good luck going forward.
Thank you so much. Thanks a million, Paul.
Cheers, Roseanne. Bye bye.